Welcome to another episode of Conversations. My next guest is a young man who happens to be Asian American, and he loves country music and doesn't live in Nashville. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. This is the show where I get to pick the guests. We can talk about anything that's on my mind. Today, my guest is Kenny Xu. He is the founder of a nonprofit called Color Us United. Color Us United, imagine that. He's also a journalist, and he is the author of a new book titled An Inconvenient Minority. So welcome, Kenny Xu, to the show Conversations.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Dr. Swain.
Well, Color Us United. Let's go there first, because our society today is just so divided. And so tell us about that organization. When did you set it up? Why did you set it up?
So I set up Color Us United. Actually, I was recruited to do it by my board, where we wanted to really advocate for a truly race-blind American society, a colorblind society. You know, that term, I think people are scared of using, but they shouldn't be scared of using because it is the American ideal, right?
Wait, Kenny. Yeah. Nowadays, that's considered racist and impossible because, according to the critical race theorists, you know, we have to be color consciousness. We can't be color blind.
Well, that's silly because actually only 32% of Americans even think their race is important to them. 32%. And not only that, white Americans right now are, if you just look at the statistics, white Americans are the least likely to believe that their race is, you know, racially superior to other races by any case. By some extension, you know, the reforms of the 60s and the 50s, they worked in helping to, you know, make America, you know, kind of understand race in a different form. But now we have to protect that, right? Because we now have a new ideology, right? That's saying, no, we need to return back to a society where we look at race, where we make race the primary factor of somebody's identity. And of course, the only people that affects actually are the people who are most victimized by that sort of mentality, which are our young minority children, who when they're taught, you know, that their race is the most important thing about them, are taught to believe less in their own self-identity, less in their self-confidence. And that affects the way that they grow up. So we do need to return to these ideals of a colorblind society.
You know, Kenny, I find it very interesting because I was born in 1954. And that was the year of the Brown versus Board of Education desegregation case that ordered the desegregation of schools all across America. And I was born and raised in Virginia. It took until the late 1960s for the integration to actually happen. And so when they talk about America being a systemically racist country, I was born into systemic racism, but I watched it collapse after the Civil Rights Movement when we passed three major civil rights acts, the 1964 Civil Rights Act that opened up accommodations, that tackled employment discrimination and various kinds of discrimination against people because of their race, their sex, their national origin, their religion. Very successful. The 1965 Voting Rights Bill, the 1968 Open Housing Bill. Those were three major civil rights acts, and we could also throw in the Immigration Reform Bill and have four civil rights acts. And at that time, our nation dismantled systemic racism, and then the racism that remained was racism that comes from individuals. So individuals had to change their hearts and minds. And with the data that you just quoted, most Americans, most white Americans, if they were holding prejudice, they have changed their hearts and minds. And people believed in assimilation, a colorblind society, equal opportunity, with the critical race theorists and the people that are pushing this new agenda, they want us to be color conscious. They clearly believe minorities are inferior, that give them equal opportunity and they still can't make progress. So you have to give them equity, which means equal outcomes, lowering the standards. You are really pushing back against that. And it must be difficult as an Asian American because you, for the most part, Asian Americans are successful. You yourself have become, or your group have become, victims of discrimination from the progressive left.
Yeah, and you know why I'm so passionate about this colorblind issue? Because I know that within my Asian American community, the reason why Asian Americans are successful in America has nothing to do with their race. In fact, Asian Americans have historically been discriminated against in the United States. But the reason why they are successful is because of their culture, is because Asian Americans study twice as many hours as the average American, according to all of the data.
I know
on this. And they have stronger two-parent family households. They have lower rates of crime. All of these statistics have nothing to do with race, because any individual can commit to not being a criminal, can commit to studying hard, but you just have to do it, right?
That's right.
I know that this society is possible. And that's what my book, An Inconvenient Minority, really is about. It's about the strength of how, a minority, Asian Americans, really proves the American dream.
Well, the thing, Kenny, I remember a study a few years ago that said the average Asian student studies something like 4 hours a night doing homework. And I think for whites, it may have been like 2 hours. And for blacks, it was the shortest amount of time. And it could have been 30 minutes. I can't remember what it was. But even among affluent blacks, they were not putting in that sweat equity. And I can tell you, as someone who was a high school dropout, teen mom, got a high school equivalency, went to college, got 5 college and university degrees, that I had to work really hard. I studied. I wanted to be an honor student. I became an honor student, but I made a choice. I knew that it was important to be an honor student. I wanted the American dream. And I believed that if I worked hard enough that I could achieve certain things. And so I put in the sweat equity and, lo and behold, I was successful, not because I was brilliant, not because I was getting all these handouts, but I worked really hard. I knew the success formula and I applied it.
Mm-hmm. And, Dr. Swain, I know that because you really wanted to be in the place that you are now, you had to make sacrifices. You had to sacrifice, in many cases, to your social life. You had to sacrifice some of your friend groups. Some people, it inspires resentment and jealousy sometimes that Asian Americans do well on these things, which is why we have the progressive left now with Harvard, which is based in critical race theory ideology,
right,
which is based in resentment and envy. Say that, hey, there are too many Asians on our campus. And actually now Harvard University and all the Ivy Leagues discriminate against Asian
They've been doing it for a while.
Stand the thought. And they've been doing it for over 35 years now.
And something, at first they were discriminating against Jews. And so the same discrimination that they have apologized for when it came to Jewish Americans and blacks, they're doing it to Asians right now. It is unacceptable. We all should be fighting back against it. We should be looking to the Asian culture for examples on how we can have stronger families. And Kenny, we're going to take a break. And when we return, more about you and your formula for success for all Americans. We'll be back after this word from our sponsor.
Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain is made possible by Cooper Steel, a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee.
Cooper Steel believes in sponsoring Carol Swain because we believe as she does, you build strong, you stand strong.
What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel is committed to excellence, responsibility, and community. Cooper Steel's motto is build strong, stand strong. They treat their employees and customers like family. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Learn more about our generous sponsor at coopersteel.com. Black Eye for America is enlightening the nation.
I would definitely encourage people to buy the book to learn a little bit more about what critical race theory is actually rooted in, Marxism.
Buy the book at bethepeoplenews.com or wherever books are sold.
Just so we can have logical and practical conversations with people who are getting misinformation and disinformation from social media, from their friends.
Now an Amazon bestseller and available on Kindle.
Absolutely. It's a must-read book.
I'm back with my guest, Kenny Hsu, and we're talking about America and factors that make for success and also discrimination against Asians, and Asian Americans in particular. Kenny, tell us about your book, An Inconvenient Minority.
My book, An Inconvenient Minority. So we have Asian American success in this country. Asian Americans have higher household incomes, higher educational attainment than the average American, and they really show the American dream works, meaning they're the antithesis to critical race theory, which says that if you're a white, you must be privileged. If you're a minority, you must be oppressed, because Asian Americans are able to be successful despite being a minority. And because of this, right, because of this success, leftist progressives resent Asian Americans and they want to discriminate against their success. This is why Harvard University, Princeton, Yale, all of these Ivy League elite colleges actually unfairly penalize Asian Americans in admissions. Harvard requires Asian Americans to have 440 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of admission as a Black student at Harvard. And as a result, what we have is an ideology that penalizes success, that penalizes Asian American excellence, and is going to impugn upon our culture of excellence in America today.
And, this discrimination against Asians, it's been going on for a long time. And you find with the progressive left, with President Biden, one of the things that he has been focused on is hate crimes against Asians. And he makes it seem as if Caucasian Americans out there, beating up, killing Asians. And that's not a true story either. Would you like to talk a little bit about, the how the left uses Asians and when and how?
When the left uses Asians when they're convenient to them. So when they can frame it in terms of a white supremacy attack on Asians, such as in the Atlanta shooting. Of course, we don't have complete confirmation that was specifically a racially motivated incident. But, when they can frame it in that way, yes, Asians are victimized. We need to stand with Asians, stop Asian hate, everything like that. But unfortunately, the objective facts is that 28% of the attacks on Asian Americans in 2018 were committed by Black Americans.
That's right.
25% were committed by white Americans. And so this is not an attack of white supremacy. There's many races, many people are involved. You should not be blaming it. And of course, once those facts came into the discourse, you saw the left dissipate its narrative about stop Asian hate. And so this is where we are today.
Well, I think it's important for people to have the true statistics about hate crimes. And, we shouldn't allow the left to throw out this misinformation, the false narratives, and then they will fade into the woodwork until it's convenient, to push that narrative again. And you're absolutely right about the family structure of Asians. There's data that show that when children are raised in two-parent families by their biological parents preferred, and they do better. They just naturally do better. And when it comes to poverty, instead of focusing on, how bad Blacks do and the poverty rate, the left could be telling them that if they stayed in school, they finished high school, waited until they were married before they had a child and got a job, their chances of living in poverty, it's minuscule. it just greatly diminishes the likelihood they're going to be poor. And all they have to do is finish high school, wait until they're married to have a child, and get a job. And so instead of telling people the truth, the left does everything to make people feel that the world is stacked against them, that they are a victim, and it doesn't matter what they do. And I think Asian Americans, we tend to know that Japanese, Chinese, Koreans, they do well, but other Asian groups like the Vietnamese, the Filipinos, and other groups, they do well too because they work hard. And whether or not they're working in a nail salon that they started, or they're working some other industry where their parents, they've had, generational training, they tend to do well because of the culture that encourages success.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the question then comes up, well, are we going to use Asian American success as an example that other people can learn from, that other communities can learn from? Because these are very simple cultural traits that anybody can adopt. Or are we going to poke resentment, try to deny and suppress Asian success? Are we going to try to paper over things? And by the way, my heart, is based on my research for my book, An Inconvenient Minority. I've learned a lot about low-income Black communities, particularly in New York City and America today. And my heart breaks for them because in these schools, in these middle schools in New York City, you have, instead of people trying to focus on the discipline issues, the family issues, some of the structures that are going on within these low-income communities, what they're doing is that they're using grade inflation to pass low-income Black and Latino Americans from grade to grade when they have no competence to reflect their grade to grade. At some of these middle schools, you have a 95% pass rate, from grade to grade, but you only have a 15 to 25% proficiency rate on the relevant standardized test.
And, and that's not just happening in New York City. It's happening all across the country. And there was a state, and you may know which one it is, that they've decided to get rid of competency proficiency tests because it harms minorities. So they're going to hand everyone a high school diploma and say that, they are high school educated when they're really not. Some of them can barely read or write, if at all. And then the next argument will be that some of these kids will get into college too, because we've lowered the standards. There are no standards. And so they will go to college. They'll get in an ethnic studies program where they will be passed along. They will have a degree. They will not be qualified to do anything but work at McDonald's or a fast food restaurant. And then there will be the claim of disparities that racial and ethnic minorities or Blacks, they have college degrees, they're not earning as much, when they lowered the standard so low that people did not get an adequate education. And then they majored in a major that the only place where you can get a job earning money is becoming a DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion officer. And if you're lucky enough to land one of those plums, you might make six figures, but there's only so many DEI officer positions. Everyone else is not qualified, and not even the people with the DEI positions. They're not qualified really to do anything, and they've greatly diminished the value of education in America because I would argue that the people making those decisions are white supremacists. They believe that minorities are inferior. They want equity, equal outcomes, and they go about doing it by lowering standards.
You truly get it, Dr. Swain. And we've stopped caring about truly improving the lives and conditions, or at least the left has stopped caring about truly improving the lives and conditions of low-income Black and Hispanic communities, and started replacing them with a focus on this rich diversity industry that does nothing for them.
I know.
Look at ethnic studies in California. Look at the dual enrollment classes. Low-income Hispanic kids are now being encouraged to take their basic education classes in Spanish and not in English. How are you going to help a low-income Hispanic kid, many of whom are undocumented, assimilate into American society if you don't even teach them English?
Well, I mean, that's the same argument that we had a few years ago, and Rutgers University even changed their English standards. They want blacks, to practice Ebonics. We're going to take another break, and when we return, more with Kenny. And Kenny, I want you to tell people how they can help you and let them learn a little bit more about what you're doing. It's our last segment. So we'll be back after this word from our sponsors.
Dr. Carol Swain's Be the People, a call to reclaim America's faith and promise, newly released in paperback and audio with a new introduction, is a challenge to all Americans. If you are serious about being the best citizen you can be, this is the book for you. From addressing moral relativism to reclaiming the future, you'll understand why Dr. Swain is one of the most relevant voices in today's culture war. Are you ready to reclaim America's faith and promise? Purchase at bethepeoplenews.com/books or wherever books are sold. Cooper Steel is a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee. What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel's motto is, "Build strong, stand strong." Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain.
I'm back with my guest, Kenny Hsu. Kenny, tell us more about Color Us United and some of its initiatives.
When you are many employees right now, many students, many teachers are facing the onslaught of an ever aggressive diversity and inclusion and equity industry. They're now mandating anti-racist trainings, diversity trainings in Fortune 500 companies. If you work for a school, some are teaching critical race theory in classrooms. And I know that many of you are stakeholders in those companies and don't want to, fear speaking out.
Right.
That's okay, because if you go to coloristunited.org and you can send us a tip and we will speak out and be your voice for a truly race-blind America and stand up for that. One of the biggest...
Wait a minute, Kenny. Give me an example of how that would work. Like a person is at they work for, I don't know, Amazon, and they are discriminated against, and they contact you. How are you going to stand up for that person?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to send it on the tip line or sign up and tell us your story at coloristunited.org. We read every email. We often get back to you, and we determine how we want to work with you. Our most recent initiative, for example, we're taking on the Salvation Army. We got a tip from a supporter who works for the Salvation Army, and he recently talked about the recent curriculum that the leadership is imposing upon their membership, asking them to repent.
This is really interesting because. Some groups went after the Salvation Army because the Salvation Army, aren't they Christian, and they have a religious background, and they have had procedures that were non-discriminatory, but the left went after them, in particular, I believe, the LGBT community. Am I right about that?
The Salvation Army has an evangelical Christian base. They've always been committed to true progress. Except recently, they've caved into new demands. They're asking their members now to repent for their racism.
You're kidding.
They're not racist. I'm not kidding. It's on our website, coloristunited.org.
So that's kind of like the Chick-fil-A guy polishing the shoes of Black people. These Christian based organizations, even if they win a battle, they suddenly become woke.
This is not just something you find in the left-wing academia anymore. It's bleeding over into even what we thought are traditionally Christian evangelical domains. So we have to stand up. We have a new petition campaign, and if you're listening and you're a Salvation Army member, donor, supporter, go to our website, look at our petition, and sign on, because we need to hold the leadership accountable. They're going against the will of their base.
But Kenny, most people don't know about the Salvation Army becoming woke. Today is the first I've heard about it. What does Color Us United do as far as getting information out? Like lots of people would love to know, that this is taking place. So do you try to get the information out? You're a journalist, so have you written any articles about this?
So we have a huge reach at Color Us United. I've appeared on Fox many times. I talked about the California ethnic studies that we did. I talked about the Harvard case. Now I want to talk about the Salvation Army and what they're doing and how they've recently been going woke. So yes, through journalism, commentary, and of course, we're actually going to meet with the leadership and sponsor events with the Salvation, with local chapters of the Salvation Army, not the national chapters, because some of them have gone woke. The local chapters, they're still totally aligned with true colorblind ideals, and we're going to push the leadership to rescind their woke statements.
Well, that sounds great. And tell us, more about some of the things that you're doing. I want our viewers to really understand your organization better.
Mm-hmm. We're complete. Our entire mission, right? Our entire mission is multimedia advocacy on your behalf, because we're speaking to the millions of Americans, right, who are frustrated with the word racism being used as a political cudgel against them, right? That's what we're speaking to, because the vast majority of Americans are not racist, and America is not a racist country. And people are trying to convince you now. People are now trying to convince white people that they are racist who are not racist. That is, if they can do that, they've already won. So we need to push back on that very premise.
I agree, Kenny. And I've been saying that, critical race theory is the civil rights issue of our time. But I believe that racial and ethnic minorities like us have to take the leadership role, just like you're doing, because there's so many white Americans, they mean well. They feel like they've been really blindsided by what's happened, how they have been demonized, how the children are being shamed. Some of them feel like they cannot speak up. And I always tell people, no, you're protected by civil rights laws. You have rights. It's un-American to bully and shame your children because of the color of their skin. And so I think that what you're doing is very important. And we, the racial and ethnic minorities, we have to lock arms with our white brothers and sisters. There's one race, the human race. We're all brothers and sisters. And we have to fight this battle together. It is a battle, and it will destroy America if we allow the progressive left to divide us the way they're trying to do.
I 100% agree. And, if you're a white person out there and everything like that, it's funny because they're actually, what the left is doing is they're actually exploiting white people's inherent compassion. As I told you before, white people are the race in America least likely to believe that their race is superior. Actually, least likely. And because of that, people are saying, if you want to be compassionate, you have to buy into this anti-racism stuff. If you want to care about Black people, you have to buy into this diversity, equity, inclusion stuff. This is why people like you and me and everybody have to push back and say, no, that is not the case.
And something, it is really dividing families, because I have so many friends in church and various places where their children have been indoctrinated to hate themselves, to hate their ancestors. And the children are ashamed of the success that they have had. They are ashamed of living a normal life. So they have made it like, if you, have parents that are together, they made good decisions, good financial decisions, you're living comfortably, that is a point of shame now. And so it's just totally ridiculous, but they should not be allowed to divide families the way they are. And so, Kenny, I really appreciate your work. And I want you to tell our viewers how they can contact you, how they can support your work. And I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Well, you remind me of Mao Zedong's line: if we can separate children from their parents, we can take over their minds. And that's what we're standing against. And that's what we have to stand for, a colorblind society. An Inconvenient Minority is my book. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere that books are sold. And Color Us United, colorusunited.org. Sign our Salvation Army petition and get on board.
Thank you so much. And we'll be following you and expect great things to continue.
Thank you.
We'll be back after this word from our sponsor.
Many ask, why should I care about critical race theory? I'm Dr. Carol Swain, and along with Dr. Christopher Shore, we've authored a new book, Black Eye for America, How Critical Race Theory is Burning Down the House. Every American should care about CRT because this radical Marxist philosophy is dividing our country and taught to our children, but we're going to stop it. Endorsed by Dr. Ben Carson, Black Eye for America is a playbook on combating CRT.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Wasn't that a great interview with Kenny Shue? I mean, Kenny's information, not me. I'm not great. But Kenny provided us with some useful information about Asian Americans and how we can come together. Color Us United, go to that website, find out more about what Kenny is doing, pick up his book, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you so much for watching Conversations. Tell your friends and families about the show.